Many were beginning to believe in Jesus, but the Jewish leaders were instead getting concerned. They said, if we leave him alone, all will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our land and our nation. One perspective of this is that despite all his good works, the leaders were more concerned about their own status quo of reputation, power, and land. They saw Jesus and framed him as starting a sedition or revolution against the Roman Empire. As a form of fear-mongering, they felt a high risk of vengeance from the Romans and therefore planned to kill Jesus. Despite their diabolical intent, Caiaphas, their high priest at the time, unconsciously prophesied the truth and fulfillment of God's plan for the atonement of sins. He said, "It is better for you that one man should die, and instead of the people, so that the whole may not perish." Their sin of pride is one root problem. In sinning, they turn away from God, thinking they are better off without God. They were more about self-interest and self-preservation than being selfless and for what's in the best interest of their people. Today, we have our share of crises in the social, political levels, on top of the pandemic and economic crisis. But the biggest crisis is spiritual, and we've seen the increasing persecution of Christians. There were more Christian martyrs in the 20th century than in all the previous 19 centuries combined. The Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen had prescient words over 80 years ago and was ahead of his time. I think they're very good, so I'll read actual excerpts from his talks, especially on revolutions, since it's a key theme in the gospel reading. He said, "Our Lord remade the world by reforming man. This is the lesson of Easter Day, so contradictory to the spirit of the world, which reforms institutions but leaves man unreformed." Venerable Sheen further talks about the world's solutions. Some say, reform private property and men will no longer be selfish. Others say, reform parliaments into dictatorships and men will no longer be egotists. Others say, reform the monetary system and men will no longer be greedy. In each and every instance, the revolution is against something outside of man, his property, his government, his finances. Never once is man blamed for the world's debacle, and never once does the reform touch man. So insignificant is man in the scheme that today the tendency is to make man fit institutions. Instead of the state existing for man, man exists for state. A man is dehumanized and depersonalized and comes out identified as either with a nation, a race, or a class. A government policy is worth more than a man. Hence, if millions are deprived of liberty, or if hundreds of thousands starve, or if thousands are purged, it matters not as long as the party survives. Instead of making the hat fit the head, the new reformers make the head fit the hat, which is only another way of saying that institutions, political themes, dictatorships must survive, even though it means the destruction of man. The Christian reform is just the opposite. It believes that the Reformation must begin in man. It agrees that there should be revolution, but maintains that the revolution should not be against something outside man, but something inside man, namely his pride, his egotism, his selfishness, and his envy. It places the blame not on institutions, but on humanity, not on things, but on persons, not on property, but on man, not on parliaments, but on conscience. Man is always prone to blame someone else. The Archbishop also touches on today's gospel reading. Naturally, the world which blamed institutions could not tolerate him who blamed man. That is why, though they disagreed among themselves, they all agreed that he should die. It was an insult to them to say that they were to blame, just as it would be an insult to many a modern state to say its leaders or its dictators were selfish and sinful. All the judges agreed that he should die rather than their institutions should perish. Just as today it is agreed that man should die rather than the dictatorship perish. They would have proclaimed him king if he said the fault was in things, but they crucified him because he said the fault was in man. They would have welcomed him if he reformed institutions, but they reviled him because he sought to reform man. Good Friday was the world's answer to God, the temporary triumph of those who make the reformation of institution more important than the reformation of man. In perfect keeping with the philosophy of subjecting the human to the institutional, the judges nailed them to a cross. A man was fitted to a thing. God incarnate was crucified to a cross. It was like a sick patient killing the physician because he found the source of the disease. Fulton Sheen goes on to say, "For it is to the saving of many spiritual regeneration that Easter calls us. That is why true Christianity is the greatest revolution in the world. It is easy to topple thrones. It is easy to burn palaces. It is easy to destroy civilization. These revolutions only touch the surface of things. But to topple selfishness, bomb greed, destroy sin, that requires your lower self. That will make you one of the greatest revolutions in the world, a saint."